He's our newest beat reporter on PHNX Cardinals. He will also be in attendance when we head to South Beach. It's Craig Morgan joining the program. He's got a new banger of an article at gophnx.com, which is unlocked for free for you to read right now. Craig, my guy, how we living?
I can tell you I'm not taking my shirt off on South Beach, okay? I want to make that clear. So if people are coming for eye candy, it's going to be your responsibility, not mine.
Does it take years to kind of crack that hockey tan that you've developed over the last 20?
Buddy, you don't want to see my legs. You don't want to see really much of my body at this point, at this age. But, I wanted to talk to you about Madden too, because, I'm not familiar with these things. I'm obviously an old guy, and, I think I've gotten away from the ages stuff now that I've left Leah Merrill behind, but I really don't understand some of the things you guys are talking about. So maybe you can explain some of this to me, because I haven't been into video games since Space Invaders, things like that.
That's fair.
Well, I was going to try to break it down in hockey terms. It's basically NHL 96. If you can make Gretzky's head bleed sometimes if you got into the right, if you had the right, you got the joystick right enough. But it's just 2 decades later.
There's that great scene in the only hockey game I've seen, that great scene in Swingers.
Yeah,
Vaughn and his buddy are playing it on the Super Nintendo. That to me sounds like more fun than playing EA Sports right now with Madden. But Craig, we don't want to waste your time here, my friend. So if you haven't had a chance to read Craig's article, it's up, it's live, it's right now. It's entitled "Could Second-Year Coaching Bump Elevate Cardinals to 2024 Playoffs?" Bruce Arians saying, "I don't think there's any doubt." So let's cut to the chase, Craig. You had a chance to talk with the winningest head coach in franchise history earlier this week. How does he feel about the prospects of the 2024 Arizona Cardinals?
Well, he sees a lot of potential here, and I think you can see that in the story. Listen, everybody's going to have their doubts, their questions. You guys talked about some of the biggest questions facing the Cardinals, and I mentioned that in the story as well. But Bruce sees a lot of things coming together, sort of like when he came in. And you'll see this quite often. If you go through the annals of the NFL, you'll find a lot of coaches who have that success early on. Maybe the first year, everybody's getting used to the new system. They're learning personnel. There's got to be some turnover. But then the culture sets in. There's hope. There's a lot of belief. And if you have the quarterback, it can all come together, and you can make hay. It happened with Kenny Wisenhunt. They went to the Super Bowl in his second season. Bruce obviously had significant success. If Carson Palmer stays healthy that second year, who knows what happens? Even happened with Cliff Kingsbury, believe it or not. You can go back through the records, but there's a lot of potential here. He really likes the Jonathan Gannon hire. He's been a backer of this guy along the way, thinks he's a winner. So a lot of reasons to at least think that there's some hope. There's some potential for the Cardinals to jump to a playoff team this season.
How is the Cards' old ball coach just? I mean, now he's not 60 and sexy. He's 70 and sexy, isn't he?
Yeah. You know what? Bruce Arians is a national treasure. I think that every time I talk to the guy, you mentioned he's the winningest coach. He's probably the most quotable coach in Cardinals history as well. Loved covering him in my time covering the beat. He's still staying active. He's got the foundation. He's consulting with the Bucs still, and he's playing a lot of golf, as he told me. And of course, Bruce likes his cocktails as well. So he's having some fun, but it was great to catch up with him. He always brings it. Every time that I have ever had a conversation with Bruce Arians, you're going to get 3 or 4 unbelievable nuggets, and this was no exception.
I do think Jonathan Gannon invokes the confidence from Cardinal fans that you have a chance to compete every Sunday, regardless of talent, similar to that of Bruce Arians. Like I never felt that way respectfully with Cliff Kingsbury, certainly Steve Wilkes, but I know JG only netted 4 wins last year, but he brought that same kind of, oh yeah, we could win this game and have no business winning. And Arians did that all the time. I mean, hell, he won 10 games his rookie season with the Cardinals. So how does Arians feel about the prospects of Jonathan Gannon?
I think he's very hopeful about this team. As he mentioned in the story, Johnny, Kyler Murray is the key, and that's no shock to anyone, of course. This is the NFL. It's a quarterback-driven league, and what Kyler Murray does will dictate terms for the rest of this franchise. But he does think that Kyler's in a situation now, based on his years of service, based on how much he's matured, based on the situation that he's in with Jonathan Gannon right now. where there's all the keys that you need for a quarterback to be successful. Again, he's matured. He understands the game a lot more. He's been through a lot, as we've discussed, so he's learned from that, and he's got a really tight relationship with the coach. All of that can lead to really good things.
Yeah, I mean, and BA is not one to sugarcoat anything, right? I mean, he's as straight a shooter as they come, isn't he, Craig? And where would you did you get a feel of where maybe his hesitation would be with this team potentially taking the jump? And it certainly, I would guess, just lies in, whether or not Kyler makes that leap himself.
Yeah, he didn't want to get too much into dissecting their personnel because I don't think he's studied it enough to be, an authority on all the pieces of their defense, for instance. But with Kyler in particular, you saw the quote where he talked about how he can make some great plays, but he also makes some poor plays. You wonder if he's reached that point where he's going to have much more on one side of the ledger than the other, where he's matured, where he's learned, where he's a smarter player. And he did mention also the trouble with quarterbacks who play a lot with their legs is they can get injured. You can have leg injuries, and then they have to rely on your arm and your brain. He thinks Kyler Murray may be at the point where he can rely on those other two things, which makes him obviously a more complete weapon for the Cardinals.
You mentioned the year 2 pop. Like, I think about Carson Palmer in his first year in Arizona threw a lot of interceptions. I think he had like 23 to 20 TD to INT ratio. And then, Craig, he outlined Jameis Winston in your article, talking about, like, had they not gotten Tom Brady, like, they would have worked to fix Jameis. And I believe him, by the way. Like, I know Jameis threw like 30 and 30 that year. I think Arians would have definitely been able to craft a more suitable statistical skill set for Jameis Winston to be able to rely on. And I feel the same way about Kyler Murray. Like, Kyler Murray had a 2-to-1 touchdown interception ratio under Drew Petzing. And now he's got an entire offseason. I mean, that second offseason is so undervalued for people nationally that are not paying attention. There are so many examples like this throughout the NFL.
Yeah, no question. Listen, I asked him about Petzing as well, and I told Bo this, and he hasn't studied him enough to really comment on the system right now. But I don't know what to say other than that it's a quarterback-driven league, and when you have that piece in place, Bruce Arians worked with some unbelievable players, right? Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady. He knows how to work with quarterbacks, and he sees the potential in Kyler Murray. I guess I'll just say that. He sees a lot of potential. He's an incredibly talented, incredibly athletic quarterback. He just needs to put all the pieces together. But again, it's the situation that you're in as much as anything in this league. So many things can derail you, whether it's injuries, whether it's a bad situation with a coach or an offense. It just feels like, and I know we're early. We're very early. It's the off season, so things look rosy right now, but there's so many pieces that have come together for Kyler Murray heading into this season.
Real quick, Bo, I do think Bruce Arians has a type too. Like, look at the quarterbacks you've listed in that article and that he's had. First of all, they were all top picks, which, goes in conjunction with K1, but it's like Big Ben and Andrew Luck and Carson Palmer and James, like, just huge mountain men, right? Like, I always was, when I would see him, astonished how big Carson Palmer was. And then obviously Big Ben's a monster. Like, Kyler Murray does not fit that skill set. So I think sometimes it's hard for people who traditionally have had a certain kind of QB to come around and say, like, well, yeah, like, I could see myself operating with a 5'10" quarterback. So like, I think you have to be put in that position. Otherwise it's tough, because of course everybody would prefer Kyler Murray be 6'4", but he's not, right? He was drafted in baseball as an outfielder. He's a freak athlete. He just happens to be on the shorter side. And we've only seen so many quarterbacks like a Drew Brees succeed at that height.
Yeah, and I'd be fascinated to see how Bruce would manage this situation.
Right.
If he inherited, I think he'd figure out a way. That's Bruce's MO. That's his track record, that he'd find a way to work with Kyler. One thing that I was thinking about today when I was going back through the teams that I actually covered, I didn't cover Cliff like you guys did, but when you think about the situations where they've had their best quarterbacking situations, whether it was Kurt Warner or Carson Palmer, those guys were near the end of their rope, right? In both situations, you knew that this wasn't sustainable. This wasn't going to be a long-term plan. I can't help wondering right now, with the situation that they're in, with Kyler only entering his 6th NFL season, a young coach, this might be the best chance that the Cardinals have had at sustainable success, maybe since they've been in the Valley.
Yeah, and I think that's why it was appealing to even Monty Austinfort and Jonathan Gannon, even though they're kind of chomping at the bit for their first opportunity in their respective positions. But no doubt about it. I mean, Gannon's maintained that. Anytime you talk to him in front of a microphone, he's saying that K1 was the main reason they had a franchise quarterback in place, and he's locked in. The extension starts this year, so he hasn't played any year or season of that. It really is fascinating. One of the things I highly encourage people to go check it out, go phnx.com from Craig. One thing that really stood out to me, and just how you can see the similarities between BA's era and maybe JG's era, was that once the players start repeating what the coaching staff is telling them, here's the quote: when they start repeating the press what you tell them, you got them. When they're repeating that message, I mean, I hear JG, Craig, mention the process almost every press conference. And then you see Kyler Murray, his most recent, Instagram post. I mean, the caption is just, trust the process, or the process. Like, it seems like JG has the command of that locker room. Don't you get that sense in your early time working with us?
Yeah, you're definitely hearing it in all the availabilities that we've had thus far with players. They are preaching the message. And again, that can happen early on in a coach's tenure when everything's fresh. There's still hope, there's still belief. And I'm not saying it's going away, but this is the point where you can really take off. I was also happy to hear Bruce Arians say that at least at some point during the season, he was actually reading what we were writing, because most guys will tell you, yeah, I don't read anything that you guys write, which is, it's a little hard on the ego.